Finding your footing in a world that feels increasingly loud and judgmental can be one of the hardest things you will ever have to do. Many of us wake up feeling like we are walking on a thin wire, worrying that if we make one tiny mistake, everything we have built will come crashing down around us. This pressure often comes from the people we surround ourselves with, or the high expectations we place on our own shoulders. It is important to realize that life is not a performance where you have to be perfect to earn your place at the table. Most of the stress we feel is actually just noise from a society that thrives on keeping us anxious and unsure of our own value. When you start to strip away the need for constant approval, you begin to see that you are allowed to be messy and human. Growth does not happen in a straight line, and it certainly does not happen when you are paralyzed by the fear of failing. You have to give yourself the room to breathe and the permission to exist without constantly looking over your shoulder for someone else's critique or a hidden trap. Dealing with people who constantly keep you on your toes or make you feel like you are always about to get in trouble is incredibly draining. These types of individuals often use subtle hints or silent treatments to keep you in a state of high alert, making you feel like you have to perform just to keep the peace. This is a common form of control that leaves you feeling small and exhausted at the end of every single interaction. The best thing you can do for your mental health is to recognize that you are not responsible for managing someone else's moods or their unreasonable reactions. When you stop trying to anticipate every move they might make, you reclaim a massive amount of your own energy. It takes a lot of practice to stop caring about how they might react. But once you do, you realize that their power over you was mostly an illusion you were participating in out of kindness. You deserve to be in relationships where you feel safe and relaxed, not like you are navigating a minefield every time you open your mouth to speak. Confusion is something that hits everyone at some point, and it usually happens when you are trying to please too many people at once. When you listen to a dozen different opinions on how you should live your life, your own voice starts to sound like a whisper that you can barely hear anymore. This lack of clarity can lead to a lot of wasted time and a feeling of being stuck in a loop that never goes anywhere. To get past this, you need to go back to the basics and ask yourself what actually makes you feel good and what makes you feel like you are just playing a part. You do not need a grand vision for the next 10 years to be successful today. You just need to know what the next right step is for your own sanity. Sometimes that step is as simple as saying no to a social event you don't want to attend, or finally blocking a person who only brings drama into your life. Once you start making choices for yourself, the fog starts to lift and things become much clearer. Manipulation can be very hard to spot when it comes from people you actually care about, like a long-time friend or a close family member. They might use your past mistakes or your natural desire to be helpful as a way to get you to do things that benefit them while hurting you. You might find yourself agreeing to things you hate just to avoid the guilt trip that you know is coming if you say no. Breaking this cycle requires you to get comfortable with being the bad guy in their story for a little while, because a person who manipulates you will always paint you as the problem when you stop following their script. You have to trust your own memory and your own feelings more than the version of events they are trying to sell you. If a relationship feels like a constant power struggle, where you are always losing, it is probably time to step back and reevaluate why you are keeping that person in your inner circle. Your time and your peace are far too valuable to be traded away for the sake of keeping a one-sided connection alive. Self-improvement often gets sold to us as a series of expensive products or complicated routines. But at its heart, it is just about being a better friend to yourself. Think about how you talk to a friend who is going through a rough patch. You probably offer them support, patience, and a bit of perspective. Now, think about how you talk to yourself when you drop the ball or have a bad day. Most of us are incredibly mean to ourselves, using words and tones that we would never use with anyone else. Shifting this internal dialogue is one of the most powerful things you can do to change your life for the better. When you stop being your own worst enemy, the challenges of the outside world become much easier to handle because you actually have your own back. It isn't about ignoring your flaws, but about acknowledging them without letting them destroy your sense of self-worth. You are a person who deserves your own compassion just as much as anyone else does, especially during the times when things feel like they are falling apart. Social media and the constant flow of news make it feel like the world is much more dangerous and judgmental than it actually is in person. We see stories of people being canceled or judged for things they did years ago, and we start to internalize that fear as if it is happening to us. This creates a culture of walking on eggshells, where nobody feels like they can be honest or vulnerable for fear of being the next target. But if you look at your actual daily life, most people are just trying to get through their day and are not looking for reasons to hate you. Don't let the horror stories you see on a screen dictate how you interact with your neighbors or your coworkers. Focus on the real connections you have in the physical world, where tone of voice and body language tell the true story. Real life is found in the small conversations and the quiet moments, not in the loud and angry comments sections of the internet. By grounding yourself in reality, you lose that constant feeling of being on the edge of a disaster. Forgiving yourself for the times you weren't your best self is a mandatory step if you want to move forward and be happy. We all have moments we aren't proud of, times when we were the toxic one, or when we let ourselves be manipulated because we didn't know any better. Holding on to that shame does not make you a better person. It just makes you a more tired and bitter one. You have to accept that you did the best you could with the tools and the knowledge you had at the time. Now that you know better, you can do better, and that is all anyone can ever ask of you. Letting go of the past isn't about forgetting what happened, but about refusing to let it sit in the driver's seat of your life anymore. When you release that heavy weight, you find that you have so much more energy to put into the things that actually matter right now. You are not defined by your worst day, and you are not a finished product yet. Setting boundaries is often portrayed as an aggressive act, but it is actually a very kind thing to do for yourself and for your relationships. When you don't tell people what you will and won't tolerate, you end up resenting them for crossing lines they didn't even know were there. Clear boundaries are like a map that tells people how to interact with you in a way that keeps the relationship healthy and sustainable. It might feel scary to tell someone that you can't talk to them after a certain hour or that you won't discuss certain topics, but the people who truly care about you will respect those limits. The people who get angry when you set a boundary are usually the ones who were benefiting from you not having any. By standing up for your own needs, you are filtering out the people who don't have your best interests at heart. This creates a much more peaceful environment where you don't have to worry about being taken advantage of or pushed too far. Being confused about your future is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you have options and that you care enough to want to make the right choice. Our culture is obsessed with finding your passion and hustling until you reach the top. But that way of thinking causes a massive amount of unnecessary stress. It is perfectly fine to have a job that just pays the bills while you find your joy in hobbies, family, or your community. You don't have to be the best in the world at something for it to be worth doing. Success should be measured by how much peace you have in your heart, not by how many boxes you have checked on a list that someone else wrote for you. When you lower the stakes and stop treating every decision like it is a life or death situation, you actually find it much easier to make progress. Life is a marathon, not a sprint, and there is no prize for finishing first if you are too exhausted to enjoy the view. In the end, the most important thing is to keep moving forward with a sense of hope and a focus on what you can control.